when we're doing common factors, we're looking for the greatest common factor. What is a factor? So if I give you two numbers, if I give you the number 10, let's say, what are factors of 10? What are two things I can multiply together to get 10? We can always start with the lowest numbers. 1. 1 times what is 10? 1 times 2 equals 10? 1 times what equals 10? 10. Do you remember this from grade 8, a rainbow? What else can go into 10? What is 10 divisible by? 2 times 5. These are all factors of 10. You're looking for numbers that you can multiply together to give you 10. Factors of 10 are 1, because I can divide 10 by 1 evenly. I don't get a decimal. 2. What's 10 divided by 2? 5 and 10. Can 3 go into 10 evenly? Can 4 go into 10 evenly? Can 5? Yes. That's it. Those are all the factors of 10. Factors of a number are always going to start with 1 in itself, right? You can divide anything by 1, and you can divide anything by itself, right? So what are some factors of 20? Start with 1. Always start with 1 and itself. 2 goes into 20 how many times? 10 times. 4 times 5. Yes, you're right. So 3 doesn't go into 20. 4 does. 5 does. That's it, right? Now, if I ask you to find the greatest common factor, you're looking for so these are the factors of 10 and these are the factors of 20. What factors do they have in common? Let's start with that. They have a 1 in common, they have a 2 in common, they have a 5, and they have a 10. Those are all the common factors. Which one is the greatest common factor? That's it. Okay? This is the introduction to factoring. We're trying to figure out common factors for a set of terms. So to find the greatest common factor, you're finding the largest number that divides evenly into each of those terms. Okay, so let's do an example. Okay, so for this set of terms, I have an 8, I have a 20, and I have a 24. For each one, I want you to find the factors. So do it right now in your group. What are the factors of 8? 1 times 8 is 8. 2 times 4 is 8. Do they have any other factors? 3? No, you're done. 20. We already did this one. 1 times 20. 2 times 10. 4 times 5. Those are all the factors. And then for 24, always start with 1. 1 times 24. Does 2 go into 24? How many times? 12 times. Does 3 go into 24? 8 times. Does 4 go into 24? 6 times. So 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. Now we have to figure out what is the greatest common factor. They all have a 1 in common. They all have a 2 in common. They all have a 4 in common. Do they have a 5 in common? Do they have an 8? Only these two do. That's it. I can't go higher because that's it for this. So what's the greatest common factor? 4. That's it. Greatest common factor of 6x and 24. What are factors of 6? 1 and 6, 2 and 3. That's it, right? Factors of 24, we already did. 1 and 2 times 3 times 8, 4 times 6. What is the greatest common factor then? 6. Do they have an x in common? No. Only this one has an x. Okay? You're going to get into a question where they might have a variable that they have in common. If each term has a common variable, you're going to choose the one with the smallest exponent. I'm going to talk about what that means. You first want to figure out, when you're figuring out the greatest common factor, the first thing you're figuring out is the numerical value, and then you're going to see if it has any variables in common. A factor means that you're looking for a number that it can be divided by evenly, that both terms can be divided by evenly. So what are the factors of 10? 1 and 2 times anything else? 3, 4, 5 we already got. So that's it. There's only 4 factors. And factors of 15, 1 times 2, 3, 4, 5 we already got. What's the greatest common factor? 5. Do they have a variable in common? Can both of these terms be divided by a variable? What variable can they be divided by? X. Okay? Both of these terms can be divided by x. So x is a common factor. Factor means that you're looking for a number that it is divisible by that term. Okay? So when it has a common variable, you're going to choose the variable that has the smallest exponent. So what's the exponent here? We can put a 1 there, right? Both of these can be divisible by x to the power of 1. Not x to the power of 2, because if I divide this by x to the power of 2, then you're going to get a negative answer. You can't divide it by a number that's larger, by an exponent that's larger than it. So it's just, the common factor is just, greatest common factor is 5x. Okay, so if you're finding the greatest common factor of all of these, first find the number that they're all divisible by, and then you're going to figure out if they have a variable that they're all divisible by. What are factors of 6? 1 times 6, 2 times 3. That's it, right? Factors of 12. Let's just ignore the negative right now. 1 times 12. 2 times what gives me 12? 3 times what gives me 12? 4. Anything else? Nope. 18. 1 times what gives me 18? 2 times what gives me 18? 3 times 6. Does 4 go into 18? No. Does 5 go into 18? Nope. And I already got 6. What is the greatest common factor? That's the number. They all have 6 in common. What is the greatest common factor that's a variable? Do they all have a variable in common? This one's x to the power of 3, this one's x to the power of 2, and this one's x to the power of 1. So do you remember the rule? You look for the variable that has the smallest exponent, and that's your common factor. Write that down somewhere. Common factor has the smallest exponent. So what is the common factor here? X to the power of 1. So the greatest common factor here is 6x. That's it. I can't do x to the power of 2 because, like I said, if I divide this by x to the power of 2, it does not go into x to the power of 1. That does not work. It has to be the smallest exponent.